She's a witch. Shave the witch. That's what she said, holding my old sewing scissors like a joke. But there was nothing funny in the way she stood over me, one hand yanking back my hair, the other raised to cut. I was sitting in the kitchen, in my own house, drinking tea. She didn't scream, she smiled. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about hair. It had never been about hair. When you're 81, people assume you're confused, fragile, easy to manipulate. And I suppose, for a while, I let them believe that. Easier than arguing, easier than crying, easier than admitting the people you raised or let into your family think of you as a burden. But that day, when Bethany stood above me with those scissors, calling me a witch in front of her friends like I was some cartoon villain from her little drama, something cold and sharp moved inside me. Not fear, not shame, something older, something harder. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I stood up. Slowly, yes, because my knees aren't what they used to be, but steadily. And I looked at her. Really looked. "You think this is funny?" I asked. Bethany laughed. "Oh, lighten up, Helen. It's just a joke. You were the one who said you needed a trim." She waved the scissors like it was all pretend, like we hadn't just crossed some invisible line that people don't come back from. The women at the table, her yoga friends, or book club, or whatever they called themselves, giggled behind their wine glasses. The bottle on the counter was nearly empty. Noon. It was barely noon. "Get out," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" Out of my kitchen. She didn't move, not right away. I think she was waiting for me to back down. Maybe she thought I'd apologize, say I misunderstood, offer to make lunch for her guests. But I didn't. I just stood there, with my thin white hair yanked half loose from its clip, tea still warm in my mug, and a silence behind my voice that even she couldn't ignore. "You're not serious," Bethany scoffed. "This is my house, too." "No," I said. "It isn't." There was a pause, a shift. Something about my tone must have landed, because she set the scissors on the table and muttered something to her friends. One by one, they gathered their bags and left, glancing at me like I'd broken the entertainment. Bethany stayed behind, standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. I remember when you used to call me Mom." I picked up the scissors, wiped them clean with a napkin, and tucked them back into the drawer where they belonged. "Now, I'm a witch." Bethany's voice turned sharp. "Well, maybe if you didn't act like one, always watching us, making comments, acting like you're above everything." I looked at her. 36 years old. Perfect posture. Nails always done. Her voice dripping with contempt like perfume. And yet, she lived in my house, slept in my late husband's bedroom, parked her luxury SUV in the driveway that I had resealed with my own pension money. I walked past her without another word. In the bathroom, I saw myself in the mirror, a thin line of red on my scalp where she'd yanked too hard, my skin sagging, pale, my eyes dull with age, but still clear, still mine. The rage didn't come in a storm. It came like fog. Slow. I touched the comb on the counter, then let my hand fall. I couldn't feel my hands. That scared me more than Bethany. It wasn't the first time. Not the first insult. Not the first humiliation. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago. How she forgot to put my name on the gift list. Or how she always corrected my stories in front of her kids, like my memory was some defective thing to be repaired or dismissed. How she moved my photos off the mantelpiece to declutter. How my bedroom, the one room left that was still mine, was used for storage now. Boxes everywhere. Her boxes. And my son? Richard? He didn't see it. Or he didn't want to. That night, he came home late. I heard his voice in the hallway, the soft muttering between them. Then the silence. Nobody knocked on my door. No apology. No explanation. The next morning, Bethany acted like nothing happened. She made her coffee, complained about the gardener, told the dog to stop barking. I sat in the sunroom, staring out at the lawn I once tended myself. My hands still wouldn't warm up. I knew what had to be done. For the first time in years, I called Nancy, my lawyer. She hadn't heard from me since Robert died, but her voice was the same, calm, sharp, capable. I need to make some changes, I said, to my will. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, "Of course, Helen, when can you come in?" "Tomorrow." Nancy's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same brass lamp with the green glass shade. Same wall of leather-bound volumes that probably hadn't been opened since the 90s. Same faint smell of lemon polish and old files. But Nancy herself, she had changed. A little thinner, a little slower. Her voice, though, still had that courtroom bite, the kind that made grown men adjust their ties and second-guess their lies. She didn't ask why I was there. Not at first. She poured me a cup of tea, the good kind with the bergamot, and waited. "I want to amend my will," I said. She looked at me over her glasses. "Tell me everything." And so I did. Not all of it, not yet. Just the facts. How I'd transferred the deed to the house to Richard's name 3 years ago, on the condition that I could live there for the rest of my life. A gift of love, they called it then. We'd had wine. Bethany had smiled and hugged me and said, "Of course you'll always live with us, Mom. This is your home, too." I was so tired after Robert died. Tired of managing the bills, the property taxes, the repairs. Richard said they'd take care of me. I believed him. But promises decay faster than wood. Now they were measuring out my existence and how much space I took up. A spare room, a side comment. A sigh when I asked for something simple, like a lift to the clinic. Nancy listened without interrupting, just her pen gliding smoothly over the yellow pad. "Do you want to disinherit him?" she asked. I hesitated. That word, so final, so hard. Disinherit, like cutting out a part of your own body. "No," I said. "Not entirely. But I want to make sure he doesn't benefit from treating me like a ghost." Nancy nodded. "You want to place conditions?" "Yes, and I want to protect someone else." "Who?" "My granddaughter, Ellie." Nancy smiled faintly. "The one who always sends you postcards?" "Every month since she was 11. I smiled too, just for a second. "She's different. She sees me, not just what I can give." We discussed terms, legal language, trusts, life estates, things I barely understood, but Nancy made it sound manageable, like armor, tailored to fit. By the time I left her office, the sky had darkened. Late October, early dusk. I wrapped my coat tighter and walked slowly to the bus stop. Richard had stopped offering me rides months ago. Said it was out of the way. At home, the house was quiet. Bethany must have been out. Richard was probably still at work. I took my tea to the sunroom and sat in the silence, letting the cold settle into my bones. There was a photograph on the bookshelf. Me and Robert at our 40th anniversary party. He was wearing that ridiculous blue bow tie Ellie gave him. He looked so proud. I touched the edge of the frame, wondering what he'd think of all this. Would he have seen it coming? The next morning, Bethany was already in the kitchen when I came down. She didn't look up from her phone. "Morning," I said. She grunted. I poured myself coffee. The pot was nearly empty. She'd made just enough for herself. Again, I didn't comment. "You got plans today?" she asked, still scrolling. "I went to see my lawyer yesterday," I said. Calm. Even. That got her attention. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "What for?" "I'm making some changes." "To your will?" Her voice went up slightly. "Yes." A silence stretched between us, long and thin, like a wire pulled tight. Then she laughed. "Well, you do what you need to do. Just remember, Richard's the one who takes care of you now. That's not nothing." I stirred my coffee. "Does he?" "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there with her perfect nails and her ugly smirk. That night, Richard knocked on my door. Not gently, not aggressively. Just controlled. "Mom," he said, stepping inside without waiting. "Beth told me you're making changes to the will." "I am." He exhaled, hands on his hips. "Can we just talk about this like adults?" I gestured to the chair. "Sit then." He didn't. "Look, I get it, okay?" She said something dumb. But Bethany's stressed. The kids. Work. She didn't mean anything by it. She called me a witch and tried to cut my hair off in front of her friends. Richard flinched. "She was drinking. You're overreacting." That was the moment I saw it. Really saw it. The man I raised, who used to cry when his goldfish died, now defending a woman who humiliated his mother. Not because he didn't believe me, but because acknowledging the truth would cost him comfort. "I'm not changing the will out of spite," I said. "I'm changing it because I finally see things clearly." "Mom, come on. This is our house now. We're a family. You can't just—" "This was your father's house, and mine. I paid for every brick with 20 years of night shifts and elbow grease, and I gave it to you in good faith. That doesn't mean I gave you permission to erase me." He rubbed his face, frustrated. "So what? You're giving it all to Ellie." "I'm protecting the part of this family that still remembers what love looks like." Richard didn't answer. He stood there for a moment, then turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. I heard him mutter something in the hallway. Bethany's voice, low and sharp, responded. In my room, I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer where I kept Robert's letters. I didn't read them, just held the top one in my hands, feeling the paper soften with age, with time, with memory. I wasn't done. Not yet. I hadn't planned on giving them the house. Not originally. It was Robert's idea years before he passed, when the arthritis in my hands started making it harder to open jars or thread a needle. He said we should think ahead, before things got difficult, before we became a problem. "We'll give Richard the house," he said one evening, the way some people talk about giving away an old couch. "Put it in his name, but with a clause. Life estate. You'll stay here as long as you need." I remember folding the laundry when he said it. I kept smoothing the same towel for minutes, not looking up. "And you think they'll just take care of me?" I asked. "Of course," he said. "He's our son." Funny how men say that like it's a guarantee, like blood is a shield against selfishness. But I loved Robert, and I trusted him. So we did it. Signed the papers. Moved the deed. Put in the clause. Bethany cried when we told them. "Oh my God, Helen, are you serious? This is so generous. You'll always have a place here." She hugged me. She cried. And I was naive enough to think she meant it. The first year was fine. I had my room, my routines. They asked me to join dinners, occasionally asked for advice. Ellie was still living at home then, and she'd come into my room in the evenings, lay on my bed, and tell me about school, about boys, about dreams. Those were the good days. I clung to them like a coat in winter. But then Ellie left for college, and everything shifted. My room became a catch-all for boxes. My chair in the living room was moved temporarily to make space for a new sound system. Bethany started buying that awful synthetic air freshener that made my eyes sting. "The house needs a more modern scent," she said. Richard, meanwhile, became quiet, distant. When I asked for help fixing the leaky faucet in the laundry room, he sighed. "Mom, just call someone. I'm swamped." I started calling people less, asking for less, shrinking little by little into the cracks of the house I'd built. And then came the comments. Bethany liked to say them lightly, with a laugh. "Helen, you really wear that same cardigan every day? Helen, you've already told that story twice this week. Helen, maybe it's time to try a shorter hairstyle. Something less old-fashioned." It was like being pricked by invisible needles. Never enough to scream, but always enough to bleed. Until the day with the scissors. That day wasn't just about humiliation. It was a declaration, a power play. She wanted to prove to herself and her friends that I was nothing, that my presence in the house was tolerated, not valued. And Richard, well, his silence afterward confirmed it. He knew what she'd done, and he let it be. The day after he confronted me in my room, I started sorting through the old files. Bank statements, receipts. I'd helped them more than I remembered. The down payment on Richard's first car, the contribution to their wedding, the check I wrote when Bethany lost her job in 2012 and they couldn't pay the mortgage. "Just until we're back on our feet," they said. I never asked for repayment. I didn't want gratitude. I wanted decency. That same week, I met again with Nancy. We set up the formal changes, the will, the trust, the notification timeline. We even discussed what to do if they tried to contest it. I left nothing open to interpretation. As I left her office, I saw a sign across the street. Sunridge Assisted Living, free tours today. I don't know why I crossed. I think I needed to see if I had options, a place of my own. Not a prison, but a choice. The building was warm, bright. A woman named Claire gave me the tour. She didn't speak to me like I was slow, didn't smile with pity. She pointed out the library, the garden, the kitchenettes in the private apartments. "You'd have your own keys, of course," she said. "It's your home." I stood in one of the sample rooms, sunlight pouring through the window, and felt something I hadn't in years. Space. No tension humming in the walls. No muffled voices behind closed doors. No air freshener hiding disdain. I took the brochure and left without saying anything. That evening, I cooked for myself. Just for me. An omelet with mushrooms and herbs. Simple, but made the way I like. I set the table for one, lit a candle, sat down slowly, feeling the ache in my knees and the steadiness in my hands. Bethany came home late. She glanced at the table and laughed. "Fancy." "I wanted a quiet dinner," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "You could have joined us." "I wasn't invited." She didn't reply. Later that night, I heard Richard's voice again outside my door. Not shouting, not apologizing, just whispering. Always whispering. And that's when I knew. They didn't think I had any power left. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. When I walked into Nancy's office that Friday, I brought more than documents. I brought a decision. Not just to amend my will, not just to shift money around or scratch out names. I came ready to reclaim my dignity. On paper, in ink, under seal. Nancy closed the door behind me and gestured toward the same chair. Ready? I nodded. No more loopholes. We went over everything line by line. The clause that allowed me to live in the house had always been conditional on mutual respect, though we both knew respect is hard to measure in court. Now, we added a formal life estate revocation trigger. Any attempt to remove me from the home or cause me mental or physical harm would terminate the agreement. If they ever so much as try to force you into a home, Nancy said, tapping the clause, they lose everything. Next, the inheritance. I left Richard a nominal amount, enough to make it clear he hadn't been forgotten, but also that he hadn't earned more. The rest, including the house, after I'm gone, savings, bonds, and the contents of the antique safe Robert hid in the back closet, would go to Ellie. Through a trust, managed by a professional executor, not Richard. And what if they contest this? I asked. They can try, Nancy said, but the documents are clear, and your competence has been assessed. I'll have Dr. Lanning file the evaluation next week. You're of sound mind, Helen. They won't be able to say otherwise. That hit harder than I expected. Sound mind. As if that alone needed proving. For years, I'd allowed myself to be seen as harmless, gentle, fading, and that had made me invisible. I signed the papers, page after page, the weight of the pen steady in my fingers. It was done. Walking back home, the leaves crunched under my shoes like old memories, gold and brown, breaking down into the dirt. The air smelled of smoke. Someone burning brush down the road. It reminded me of childhood, autumns in Vermont. My mother baking pies, not to please anyone, but because she loved the scent of cinnamon in the air. When I got home, Bethany's car was in the driveway. I expected silence, cold glances, the usual performance. But I found her at the kitchen table, flipping through a stack of magazines. Lawyer again? She asked, without looking up. I put my coat on the hook. Yes. She turned a page. You know, if you're changing things, it's only fair to let Richard know he's your son. I did, I said calmly. She froze. What do you mean you did? I told him. After you tried to cut my hair? That was a joke. No, that was a moment of clarity. She scoffed. You're overreacting. I opened the fridge. A half-eaten salad, a bottle of white wine, a container of soup, unlabeled. Nothing for me. I'm going to the market, I said. Suit yourself. I left the house without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. There was power in the quiet, the kind they didn't understand. At the market, I bought eggs, real butter, and a jar of blackberry preserves. I hadn't made biscuits in years, but tonight felt like a good night to start again. Not for them, not for company. For me. When I returned, Richard was home, his car still ticking warm in the driveway. I walked past him in the hallway without speaking. Helen, he said, using my name now, not Mom. I turned. We should talk. We already did. He stepped closer, palms up like a man begging for peace. Look, this is getting out of hand. Beth told me what you're doing. You're making lawyers rich and breaking this family apart. I didn't break anything, I said. I just stopped pretending. His jaw clenched. What do you want? An apology? Do you want Beth to kiss your feet? I want respect. She's trying. You're not easy to live with. And you think I enjoy living in a house where I'm erased? Where my presence is tolerated like mold in the basement? That's not fair. No, Richard, I said, voice steady. What's not fair is being treated like a burden in the house I paid for. What's not fair is watching your wife laugh as she calls me a witch and you standing there doing nothing. He didn't respond, just stood there, stuck between guilt and habit. Whatever's in that new will, he finally said, I hope it's worth it. It is, I said, because for the first time in years, I sleep without grinding my teeth. He turned and walked away. That night, I baked. The kitchen filled with warmth, the butter scent curling through the halls like an old lullaby. I ate alone. 2 biscuits with jam, a cup of strong tea, and a book I'd been meaning to reread for years. They didn't come downstairs. No footsteps, no comments, only silence. And in that silence, I felt something shift. The next morning, I called Claire at the assisted living center. Hi, dear, I said. I'd like to schedule a trial stay, just a week. I want to see what it feels like. Claire sounded delighted. Of course, Helen. We'd love to have you. I stood at the window after hanging up, the early sun hitting the frost on the grass. It sparkled like sugar. They thought they'd pushed me into a corner. They had no idea I was building a door. It surprised me how easy it was to arrange a trial stay at Sunridge. I thought there'd be forms, hesitations, some kind of evaluation. But Claire handled everything with a smile in her voice. We'll have your room ready Monday. You don't need to bring much, just what makes you feel like you. I hung up and looked around my room. My things, my photos. My father's watch still in the top drawer. The little sewing kit Robert gave me when we couldn't afford anything fancier. My life, distilled into a single room in a house that no longer felt like mine. I didn't say anything that weekend. Not to Richard. Not to Bethany. Let them sit with their silence. Let them wonder. I cooked for myself. I cleaned what I needed. I moved through the house like a tenant preparing to move out. Because I was. Monday morning, I dressed neatly. Gray wool skirt, white blouse, the cardigan Ellie sent from university. I packed a small suitcase and left it by the door. When Bethany came down and saw it, her eyebrows lifted. Going somewhere? Yes. For how long? A week? She sipped her coffee, unconcerned. Richard didn't say anything. I didn't tell him. That got her attention. Her head tilted slightly, suspicious. What's going on, Helen? I'm trying something new. You mean that senior place? I smiled. Sunridge? Yes. She snorted. You'll hate it. Old people and rules. You won't last 2 days. Maybe, but I'll decide that for myself. She leaned against the counter. So, what? You're leaving us? I'm giving myself space, something you and Richard seem unwilling to offer. Bethany opened her mouth, to argue, to scoff, to insult. I don't know, but I didn't wait to find out. I picked up my bag, opened the door, and left. Claire met me at the entrance, her smile warm and steady. The room was small but bright. A clean bed, a window that faced the garden, a reading lamp already lit. We've got a watercolor class at 11, she said, or you can just settle in. I think I'll walk a little. The garden was quiet. Trees half turned gold, birds picking at seed trays. A woman in a lavender coat sat on a bench, nodding at me as I passed. No one looked through me. No one asked what I was doing there. That first evening, I slept better than I had in months. No footsteps above my head. No muffled arguments. Just the gentle creak of the heating system and the faint chirp of a clock down the hall. On Wednesday, I called Ellie. Grandma? Her voice lifted in surprise. Everything okay? I'm at Sunridge, just for a week. She was quiet a moment. You okay? Better than okay. I'm breathing. That made her laugh. That bad, huh? It's not just the house, sweetheart. It's how it feels to be ignored in it. I know, she said softly. I've seen it. That stayed with me all night. I've seen it. And she had. Even as a teenager, Ellie had noticed things the others didn't, or didn't care to. On Friday, Claire brought me a form. If you decide to stay permanently, we can waive the deposit, she said. No pressure. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure yet. I needed to see what they'd do without me. That night, I called Richard. He answered on the third ring. Mom? I'll be gone a few more days. Where are you? Sunridge. Silence. Are you okay? I'm fine. You could have told us. I didn't think you'd care. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is living in a house where I'm mocked and erased. You let that happen. Every day. He didn't deny it. I'm not saying this is forever, I said, but I needed to remember what it feels like to be treated like a person. More silence. Then, Bethany's upset. I'm sure she is. She says you're trying to make her look bad. She did that herself. I hung up before he could argue. That weekend, Ellie came to visit. She brought cookies. Sat with me in the garden. Asked about my favorite books. About Robert. About my mother. You know, she said, brushing crumbs off her jeans, when I was little, I used to think this house would be yours forever, that no matter what, you'd be there, like a lighthouse. I looked at her, this young woman with Robert's eyes. Maybe I stayed too long, I said. Maybe the light was never meant to keep others safe. Maybe it was meant to show me the way out. She nodded. I think you're braver than all of us. For the first time in weeks, I cried. Not from pain, but from recognition. I returned home the following Monday, not because I had to, not because I missed it, but because I needed to see what the house looked like when I wasn't inside it, what they had allowed it to become in my absence. The porch light was off, though it was already dusk. The trash cans were overflowing, and someone had left a pair of muddy shoes on the welcome mat. I used to sweep that porch every Friday. I used to care. Inside, it was quiet, not peaceful, just hollow. Bethany was in the kitchen. She glanced up from her phone. You're back, she said flatly. For now. She leaned on the counter, arms crossed. You planning on moving out permanently? I'm considering it. Richard came in from the garage, wiping his hands. Mom. Richard. He gestured toward the table. We should talk. No, I said. You should listen. They both looked startled. Maybe they expected the usual, the careful mother, the patient guest in her own home. I went to Sunridge, I said, because I needed to remember who I was before I became a coat rack in your hallway. Bethany rolled her eyes. Here we go. I'm speaking, I said sharply. She shut her mouth. You've both treated me like a placeholder. A nuisance. I can't even sit in the living room without feeling like I've invaded your space. You used my room for boxes. You moved my pictures. You made jokes about my clothes, my memory, my presence. And the moment I dared assert myself, you mocked me. You tried to humiliate me in my own kitchen. Bethany scoffed. It was a joke. No, I said. It was a warning. You thought I'd stay quiet. You thought I'd keep shrinking. Richard looked at the floor. I continued. I have rewritten my will. I have removed your names from everything except a token share. The house will go to Ellie. The money too. And I have full legal protections in place for the remainder of my life. Any attempt to pressure, evict, or coerce me will result in immediate forfeiture of what little remains. Bethany went pale. You can't do that, she said. I already have. Richard looked up. Mom, this is our home now. No, I said, standing straighter than I had in years. This was my home. I let you in, and you mistook that for surrender. They didn't speak. I'll be moving out within the month. Sunridge has offered me a unit. You're going to live in some retirement dorm? Bethany snapped. I'm going to live somewhere I'm respected. That's more than I can say for this place. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm freeing myself. I turned and left them there. In my room, I began packing slowly. Not everything, just the pieces of my life that still felt like mine. Letters, photos, a blanket I knitted the winter Robert died, my books. Ellie called that night. How did it go? I told them. How did they take it? Like people who thought I'd never learn to say no. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm proud of you, Grandma. I wish it hadn't come to this. Maybe it always would have. The next morning I went to the garden. My garden. The rose bush was overgrown, the lavender dry. I hadn't tended it in weeks, but it still grew. Wild, stubborn, like me. That afternoon, Bethany tried to corner me. You're really going to leave everything to her? I am. She's a child. She's the only one who ever asked me how I was doing. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said. You did that. I'm just refusing to hold the pieces anymore. She stared at me, eyes full of fury she didn't dare unleash. You're going to die alone in that place. Better alone with peace than surrounded by people who can't stand the sound of my breath. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, hands shaking. Not from fear, but from clarity. I had one final thing to do. I pulled out the audio recorder Ellie gave me 2 Christmases ago. Just in case, she'd said. I'd never used it. Until now. I pressed record. This is Helen March, age 81. I am of sound mind. This recording is for documentation only, not to be used unless necessary. And I told the story. All of it. From the first time Bethany moved my chair without asking. To the morning I found my framed photo in the hallway closet. To the day she tried to cut my hair and called me a witch. I spoke until my throat was dry and my heart felt lighter. Then I saved the file, labeled it, and emailed it to Nancy. Just in case. Her name was Marion, and she lived 4 houses down. We met in 1984 at a church fundraiser. I remember it because Robert forgot his wallet and had to borrow $5 from the church offering plate. Marion laughed so hard, she spilled lemonade on her shoes. She'd been my friend ever since. I hadn't seen her in months, not since her hip surgery in the spring. I'd meant to visit. I told myself I'd call. But weeks slipped by the way they do when you're surviving instead of living. Now, I needed someone who remembered who I used to be. I walked down Maple Street slowly, feeling every step in my joints. The air smelled of cut grass and something sweet, someone baking. Marion's house still had the white porch swing her husband built in '91, before the stroke took most of his speech. He passed 5 years ago, but she still kept his reading glasses on the side table by the couch. She opened the door before I could knock. Helen March, she said, narrowing her eyes. If you're a ghost, you've aged well. I smiled. I'm sorry it took me so long. She stepped aside. Come in. I just made coffee. It's terrible. The living room was the same as always. Quilted pillows, old doilies, shelves of paperback novels with cracked spines. Familiar, unapologetically so. We sat across from each other, steaming mugs between us. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "You look like hell," she said gently. "I've been living in it." She didn't laugh. I told her everything about Bethany, the scissors, the whispers, the silence, the decision. Marion didn't interrupt. She didn't offer pity or advice. She just listened, the way only someone your age can, someone who knows how small things grow into grief. I kept making excuses, I said. For them. For him. Of course you did. You loved him. I still do. That's not the same as letting him walk over you. We sat quietly for a while. Finally, she leaned forward. "Do you remember when Robert had his gallbladder out and I brought over that apple cobbler and you were crying in the laundry room?" I blinked. I hadn't thought about that in years. "You told me then, I feel like if I don't stay strong, the whole house will fall apart." And I said, "Then maybe it needs to." I smiled, barely. "You always had a talent for well-timed cruelty." "Not cruelty," she said. "Truth. Helen, some things aren't worth holding up anymore. You did your job. You mothered. You kept the lights on. You stitched the family back together 100 times. And now it's unraveling anyway. Let it." "I'm afraid." "Of what?" "That he'll never speak to me again." Marion's eyes softened. "Then let him be silent. You've had enough noise." We didn't say much after that, but when I left, she held my hand longer than she had to, and I felt less alone. When I got back home, there was a box outside my door. A plain cardboard box, taped closed. No note. Inside, my framed photo from the mantel, a stack of birthday cards Ellie had made me over the years, the lavender soap I liked that Bethany had accidentally stopped buying. All packed like evidence. Or worse, like a send-off. She was marking my exit before I'd even moved out. I didn't cry. I didn't knock on their door. I carried the box into my room, set it on the bed, and stood looking at it for a long time. The next day I called Claire and said I'd take the room. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes." "Wonderful. We'll prepare everything for the move next week." I started packing the next morning in earnest, not hiding it anymore, not delaying. Richard watched from the hallway. "Is this really what you want?" he asked. "No," I said. "But it's what I need." "You're choosing strangers over family." "I'm choosing myself." He didn't answer. He just stood there while I folded my shawls, one by one, into the suitcase. Bethany didn't say a word the rest of the week, but she started leaving lights off, taking the last of the milk, forgetting to unlock the front door when I went out to the mailbox. I documented everything: time, date, incident. I wasn't just leaving, I was building a record. Nancy had asked for it, just in case. Saturday night, I received an email from Ellie. "Grandma, I can help with the move next week. Just tell me when to show up, and don't worry. I already told Dad not to make this harder than it already is." I don't think he heard me, but I said it anyway. "Love you." I read it twice, then again. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and let myself cry. Just a little. For what I'd lost. And what I was finally reclaiming. The week leading up to the move was a silent war. Bethany didn't speak to me once. She passed me in the hallway as if I were a draft in the house. Something to tolerate, not acknowledge. Richard kept his distance too, but his presence lingered everywhere. Doors closed louder. Lights went out quicker. Even the dog seemed to sense it, watching me with confused eyes from the living room rug. Tuesday morning, the heat didn't come on. It was mid-October, and the mornings were cold enough now to bite. I waited an hour, then checked the thermostat. Set to 70. Nothing. By 10, I was wrapped in 2 cardigans and sitting at the kitchen table when Bethany came in with her phone and a scarf, like she was about to go shopping. "Heat's not working," I said. She didn't look up. "Huh? Can you call someone?" She glanced at me then. "We've had to cut back. Gas bills are high. We're not heating unused spaces." "Unused? You're moving out, aren't you?" Her voice was flat. "Can't waste money on empty rooms." I stared at her. "I'm still here," I said. She smiled without warmth. "For now." I didn't argue. I went back to my room, turned on the small space heater Ellie had given me last Christmas, "For emergencies, Grandma," and made a note in my notebook. Heat disabled. October 17th, 9:12 a.m. The next day, the fridge was nearly empty. Half a carton of milk. A container of cut-up pineapple. Clearly not for me. No eggs. No bread. I'd done the grocery shopping for this house for 40 years. Now, suddenly, there was nothing for me. I opened the pantry. All the cans I kept, tuna, beans, soup, gone. I checked the trash. Labels from my things, peeled and thrown away. Bethany wasn't subtle. She didn't need to be. I wrote it down. That evening, I made oatmeal in the microwave, ate it in my room. When I opened the door to take my mug to the kitchen, I found Bethany standing in the hallway. "Helping yourself now?" she asked. "I bought that food. You didn't pay for last week's." I stared at her. "Do you want a receipt?" She leaned against the wall. "Don't be dramatic. It's just housekeeping. You're almost gone." "Is that how you talk to your mother-in-law?" "No," she said. "That's how I talk to tenants who've overstayed." I closed the door gently. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply walked back to the desk, opened my recorder, and documented the exchange. Every word. Nancy had told me. Build a timeline, not just for court, for yourself, so you never doubt what you went through. I doubted so much over the years. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I imagined the slights. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. But the thing about people like Bethany is, they don't leave bruises. They leave confusion, shame. They gaslight you so long you start to think the flickering light is your fault. Not anymore. That Thursday, I went to the bank to transfer the remainder of my joint account into my private trust. It had been under both our names, mine and Richard's, since the estate transfer. He hadn't touched it in months, but I knew better than to leave it open. The teller was a kind woman, maybe in her 40s. She looked at my ID, then at the paperwork I'd brought from Nancy. "Big changes," she said with a smile. "Yes." "Congratulations," she added. That startled me. For what? For doing what most people wait too long to do? I didn't ask how she knew. I just nodded. When I returned home, a new lock had been installed on the hallway linen closet, the one where I kept my towels and extra blankets. I stood in front of it, heart pounding. Bethany walked by, sipping tea. "Richard says we need to start organizing things," she said casually. "Make space." "That's my closet." "Not anymore." I didn't say a word. I simply went to my room, recorded the date and time, and emailed Nancy the update. That night, I slept in socks and gloves. Ellie arrived Friday afternoon to help with the move. She looked tired, Midterms, probably, but hugged me tight at the door. "Grandma," she whispered, "I'm so proud of you." We packed quickly. I'd done most of it already. She just helped carry boxes to the car. Bethany stayed upstairs. Richard didn't come home until we were nearly done. He saw Ellie in the driveway and called out, "Need help?" She didn't answer. Inside, I stood by the fireplace one last time. I touched the empty mantel where Robert's photo used to be. The space looked cleaner now, but colder. "I'm ready," I said. Ellie drove. As we pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back. Not once. Sunridge felt different the second time. Not just cleaner or brighter, freer. This time, I wasn't a guest. I was a woman who had made a choice. That's a different kind of arrival. Claire helped me settle into my permanent unit, slightly larger than the trial room, with a private bathroom and a south-facing window that let in the afternoon sun. She'd even left a little welcome card on the dresser with a small pot of lavender. I unpacked slowly. No rush. Every sweater I folded into the drawer felt like another inch between me and that house. My room was small, but nothing here made me feel like I had to apologize for existing. That was worth more than square footage. Ellie stayed for an hour. We didn't talk much. She just sat on the edge of the bed while I arranged my books. At one point, she pulled out a small wooden box and handed it to me. "What's this?" "Grandpa's watch," she said. "It was in the closet. I took it before they could sell it." I held it in my palm. The leather strap was dry and cracked, but the face still ticked. Steady. "Thank you," I whispered. Ellie stood and hugged me tight. "I'll come by this weekend, and if they try anything—" "They won't," I said. "Not anymore." That evening, I joined the other residents for tea. Nothing formal, just a handful of people in the common room, sharing a tray of cookies and stories that started with back when gas was 15 cents a gallon. A woman named Ethel told a joke about her third husband's snoring. Another, Grace, complained about the soup. I laughed. Not because they were funny, though some were, but because no one here looked through me. There was no performance, no soft contempt, just people and time and the slow rhythm of living. The next morning, I received a voicemail from Richard. "Mom, we need to talk. Please call me back." I didn't. Later that day, another call, this time from an unfamiliar number. I let it ring. Voicemail. "Hi, this is Janice from Northview Elementary. We have your contact listed as Ellie March's emergency backup. She's okay, but we thought you should know she fainted during a tutoring session. We've called her parents, but she specifically asked for you." My hands trembled as I pressed redial. By the time I got through, Ellie was already home. Richard had picked her up. The nurse said it was stress and low blood sugar. Midterms, probably. But what stayed with me wasn't the fainting. It was the fact that she asked for me. Me, not them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, Robert's watch ticking softly beside me, and thought about the weight of love. How it endures, how it stretches, and how sometimes it ends up in the wrong hands. The next day, Nancy called. "I listened to the recording," she said. I sat down slowly. "And?" "It's strong, clear, better than a dozen affidavits." "Will it be enough?" "It's more than enough, especially paired with your documentation. If they contest the will, we'll bury them in paper." "I don't want revenge." "I know," she said gently. "You want safety, and you've earned it." We talked through final steps: executor confirmation, property evaluations, the timeline for legal notification. Everything was in motion now. No more drafts, No more what ifs. That afternoon, I received an email from Richard. Mom, I understand that you're angry, but please don't let this get out of hand. We can talk. You don't need to go through lawyers. Just come back. We'll fix it. There was no apology, just fear. I replied with one line, "My lawyer will be in touch." Then I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of orange juice. Friday, the doorbell rang. Claire answered. It was Bethany. She stood in the hallway like someone trying to enter a hotel she hadn't booked. "She's not expecting you," Claire said. "I'm her daughter-in-law. She didn't list you as an approved visitor. I just want to talk." Claire smiled politely. "I'll check." She knocked on my door. "Do you want to see her?" she asked. "No." Claire nodded. "I'll tell her." I heard murmurs, then footsteps, then silence. That night, I lay in bed and thought about power, how it changes hands, sometimes slowly, sometimes in a single word. No. That word had saved me. They say when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I used to think that was just a bitter saying, something people said after years of regret. But now I think it's a warning, a quiet one, the kind most of us ignore until it's too late. Richard showed me who he was the night he defended Bethany over me, and again when he said nothing after the scissors, and again when he let the heat stay off. Still, part of me wanted to believe there was something left, a sliver of the boy who used to leave daisies in a cup on my nightstand when I was sick, the boy who couldn't sleep unless I tucked him in. So when he called again the next week, I answered. "Mom." "Richard, you blocked Bethany." "I didn't block her. I declined her visit. There's a difference." He sighed. "She wants to apologize. I'm not interested in her performance." He was quiet. "I listened to the recording," he said finally. I froze. "How?" "She found it, on your laptop, before you moved. She copied it." "Of course she did." "She played it for me," he continued. "Said you'd twisted everything, that you edited it." I waited. "I didn't hear anything twisted," he added. "I heard you." That silence between us, the one that had been growing for years, shifted slightly. Not gone, but thinner. "I should have stopped her," he said. "Yes." "I should have stepped in sooner." "Yes." More silence. "I don't know how to fix it." "You can't," I said, "but you can stop breaking it." He didn't ask me to come back. He didn't cry. But his voice, for once, didn't sound like a stranger's. After we hung up, I sat by the window again. The trees outside were nearly bare now, just a few stubborn leaves hanging on, like old habits. That Sunday, Ellie came over with a small duffel bag and a tired smile. "Weekend off," she said. "Figured I'd spend it somewhere sane." We watched a movie on the tiny screen in the lounge, ate cookies that were too sweet, laughed too loud. Claire walked by and winked. When the credits rolled, Ellie turned to me. "Dad's been weird," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Like, actually listening. He asked how I was doing. That hasn't happened since I was 12. I said nothing. "Do you think he's sorry?" "I think he's waking up." She nodded. "I hope he stays awake." That night, I got an email from Nancy. Subject: Court Notice Helen. Just a heads up. Bethany has filed a motion to challenge the amended will. Claims undue influence and mental incapacity. It's weak. We'll crush it. But we'll need to go to court. I stared at the screen. She was still trying, still clawing. But I wasn't afraid. Monday morning, Nancy called again. "She's angry," she said. "But she's sloppy." The motion contradicts itself, no evidence, no doctor's statements, just noise. Let her make noise, I said. We'll file a response by the end of the week. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Nothing dramatic, just a preliminary session. But it meant I'd have to see them both again. Bethany, Richard, maybe even Ellie. I wasn't sure what I felt. Dread? Closure? I told Claire about it while we watered the plants in the sunroom. She sounds like the type who won't stop until someone stops her, Claire said. She's never been stopped before. Well, she said, patting my hand, then maybe it's time. I smiled. Later that day, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address, just my name. Inside, 1 page. Helen, you were right. About everything. I was cruel. I thought I was protecting what was mine, when really I was just afraid of losing control. You're not a burden. You never were. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to have the words. Bethany. I folded it carefully, not out of sentiment, out of record keeping. I placed it with the rest, the timeline, the emails, the recordings. Let the judge hear everything. Courtrooms are colder than they need to be, not from air conditioning, but from the absence of softness. No curtains, no color, just pale walls, dull wood, and a silence that hums louder than conversation. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived early, wearing my best coat, navy blue, with a silver brooch Robert gave me for our 35th anniversary. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I wanted to feel whole. Nancy met me at the doors. She had a folder under one arm and the look of a woman ready to bite through steel. You look strong, she said. I feel steady. That's more than most. Bethany arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by a young lawyer in an expensive suit that looked like it had never met a client who paid in cash. Richard walked 3 steps behind her, head down. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe just smaller. Bethany didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her body radiated tension, back straight, jaw tight, every movement calculated. She was wearing pearls, as if that could make her decent. The judge was a woman, late 50s, sharp eyes. She read through the file in silence, then glanced over her glasses. Let's begin. Bethany's lawyer spoke first. Long words, phrases like emotional manipulation and capacity concerns. He said I had rewritten my will under undue influence, that I had been isolated, that my sudden departure from the home was erratic behavior. I didn't flinch. Nancy stood next, calm as still water. She presented the recordings, the timeline, the signed evaluations, the notarized statements from staff at Sunridge confirming I was not only lucid, but thriving. Then she played the clip. Bethany's voice. She's a witch. Shave the witch. The courtroom was dead quiet. The judge paused the audio, then looked directly at Bethany. Is that your voice? Bethany didn't answer. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered. She nodded once, curtly. Yes. Context? Bethany cleared her throat. It was a joke between friends. I see, the judge said. Her voice was mild. Her eyes were not. Nancy continued. She brought up the heating issue, the food, the locked closet. She showed the photographs I had taken, the emails I'd sent, the handwritten log with neat, dated entries. Finally, Nancy handed over Bethany's letter. The judge read it twice. Then she folded her hands. I've seen enough. Bethany's lawyer stood. Your Honor, with respect. The judge raised a hand. No. Sit down. He did. This woman, she said, nodding toward me, has presented a detailed, consistent, and legally sound defense of her autonomy. She has supporting documentation, medical evaluations, and direct evidence of verbal abuse. She turned to Bethany. You, on the other hand, have offered nothing but character assassination and indignation. You're angry you were left out of a will. That's not a legal argument. That's a personal disappointment. Bethany opened her mouth, then closed it again. Richard didn't look up. The judge continued. There will be no injunction. The will stands. The trust stands. The disbursement schedule stands. And unless you wish to incur financial penalties, I suggest you do not pursue further appeals. Silence. Then, is that clear? Bethany nodded, barely. The judge turned to me. Mrs. March, is there anything you wish to say for the record? I stood slowly. I just want peace. She nodded once. Then let's give it to you. The hearing ended without applause, without drama. Just the soft scrape of chairs and the shuffle of papers being returned to their folders. Outside, the sky was clear. Bright blue. Cold wind. Richard approached me by the steps. Mom. I didn't respond. She wanted the house, not me. I thought if I kept quiet, it would stay quiet. It did, I said. But it also got cruel. He nodded. I'm sorry. I looked at him. I believe you. His shoulders relaxed. Just a little. But I'm still not coming back, I added. I know. He glanced over his shoulder at Bethany, who was arguing with her lawyer. She'll never forgive this. She doesn't have to, I said. She just has to live with it. Ellie met me at the parking lot. She opened the car door for me like a chauffeur. Well, we won. She grinned. Damn right we did. I smiled, but not because of the court, because I'd never again need anyone's permission to exist. The Sunday after the hearing, I baked, not out of celebration, not out of nostalgia, out of habit. Quiet hands doing something they remembered. The kitchen at Sunridge wasn't big, but they let us reserve it. I asked Claire for a window of time and brought my own ingredients: flour, butter, apples from the market, cinnamon. I made the pie the way Robert liked it, tart, not too sweet, with a crimped edge and a few slices of apple laid like a fan across the top. I didn't need anyone to eat it but me. But once the smell filled the hallway, they came anyway. Marion was first. Is that real cinnamon or that dusty jar kind? Real, I said, sliding a plate her way. She took a bite. Her eyes closed. My God, this tastes like 1962. Then Ethel, then Grace, then the man from down the hall with the navy cap who never smiled until that second piece. We sat around the common table, passing napkins and stories. No one asked about the court. No one asked about Bethany. They knew. Everyone knew. But what mattered more was the warmth in the room, the way Marion laughed so hard she had to hold her stomach, the way Grace dabbed her eyes and said, I forgot what pie with real crust tasted like. I slept that night with the window cracked. The air was cold, but not cruel, just enough to remind me I was alive. Monday morning, Nancy called. All documents are finalized, she said. The county has processed the updates. Ellie's trust is protected. You've got every legal shield we could build. Thank you. You did the hardest part. No, I said. I lived it. You just helped me write it down. Later that week, I received a package. No note, just a box. Inside, the cardigan I used to wear every morning. Folded, laundered, laid carefully over the lavender soap Bethany had thrown out weeks ago. There was no letter, no apology, just that small, wordless offering. Too little, too late, but not nothing. I placed the cardigan on a chair, left the soap in the drawer. I didn't need to hold a grudge to remember the truth. Some debts don't require revenge. They just need distance. Ellie visited the following Saturday. We walked in the garden. The chrysanthemums were blooming again. She told me about school, her friends, how she was thinking of studying elder law for obvious reasons. I laughed. "Promise me one thing," I said. "Anything. Don't forget how easy it is to let silence do harm." She nodded, serious. "I won't." Before she left, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "A surprise." I waited until she was gone. Inside, a photo of her, age 10, sitting in my lap. We're both holding a book, her face mid-laugh. Mine, peaceful. On the back, she'd written, "The day I decided I wanted to be like you." I cried then, not from sadness, from recognition. That night, I went to the bookshelf and pulled down Robert's letters. I hadn't opened them in years. They weren't love letters, not in the Hallmark way. They were notes he wrote every morning before work. "Don't forget to eat lunch. Call Marion back. She worries. You are not invisible." I read them slowly, one by one. And for the first time since he died, I wrote one back. I placed it in the drawer, under his watch. I kept going. I finally said no, and I am not invisible anymore. It was late November when I saw Richard again. He called ahead, the first time he'd done that in years. Asked if he could come by. Just him. "No surprises," he said. I didn't say yes right away. I thought about it overnight. Then I told him he could come Sunday at 2. I made no promises about what would happen after that. When he arrived, he looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from realizing the damage you've helped build, brick by brick, thinking it was a home. He didn't bring flowers or food, just a folder. We sat in the small sitting room near the entrance. Claire brought tea. I noticed Richard didn't take sugar. He always used to. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. "Good," I replied. He took a deep breath. I left her. I raised an eyebrow. "Bethany, I moved out last week. I'm staying at a friend's for now." I said nothing. I realized, he went on, that I kept waiting for her to change, but I never asked myself why I didn't. That landed harder than I expected. He looked down at his hands. I thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. I thought loyalty meant staying still. I let him speak. Not because I forgave him, but because I knew what it cost to say those words aloud. "She told me I was soft," he said. "Said you'd poisoned me against her. That I was weak for feeling guilty." "Did you feel guilty?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Every day." I sipped my tea. He opened the folder. Inside were papers. Scans of documents, letters. "I wanted you to have these," he said. "They're from Dad. Letters he wrote to you, to me, even one to Ellie. I found them in the basement. She hid them." My chest tightened. She said they were just old papers, that they didn't matter. I reached out and took the folder. My fingers shook slightly as I touched the pages. "I haven't read them yet," he added. "I thought maybe you should decide what to do with them." That was the first real kindness he'd offered me in a long time. We sat in silence for a while. He glanced around the room. "It's nice here." "It's mine." He nodded. "Are you happy?" he asked, almost too softly to hear. "I'm free," I said. "That's better." He nodded again. "I want to be better too, not for the will, not for money, just because I see it now." What I became. You weren't the only one who didn't see. I know. He stood to leave, hesitated, then stepped forward and kissed the top of my head like he used to when he was little. "I'm sorry, Mom." I didn't answer. Not then. Not out loud. But I didn't pull away. After he left, I brought the folder to my room. I opened it carefully, reverently. Inside, 7 letters, all in Robert's handwriting, all dated after his diagnosis. The one to me was short. Helen, if you're reading this, I'm already where I can't hold your hand. But I want you to know, you've carried more than your share. If they forget what you've done for this family, don't you dare forget it yourself. Speak up. Say no. And when it's time, let go. Love you always, R. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it back and placed it beside the one I had written to him. A conversation across years. That night, I sat by the window again. It had snowed lightly, just enough to dust the tops of cars and rooftops. The sky was low and gray, the kind that softens sound. I thought about what Richard had said, about leaving, about guilt, about change. I didn't know if we would ever be close again, but I believed him now. That counted for something. The first Christmas at Sunridge was quieter than I expected. No children running through the halls, no overcooked turkey or tense conversations over wine. Just a modest tree in the common room, a tray of shortbread, and Bing Crosby playing softly from a Bluetooth speaker someone's grandson had set up. And yet, it felt more like Christmas than any I'd had in years. Marion knit scarves for everyone. Grace organized a secret Santa, which meant 6 of us ended up with lotion or crossword books we already owned, but no one complained. We sat around in our silly hats, laughing too hard over dollar gifts and stale jokes. I received a small package from Ellie, a handmade card, a tin of peppermint tea, and a silver necklace with a tiny H pendant. "You taught me what strength looks like," she'd written. I wore it every day afterward. On Christmas Eve, Richard called again. "I'm not asking to visit," he said. "I just wanted to say Merry Christmas." His voice was quiet, sincere. "Merry Christmas," I said back. There was a pause. "I saw Ellie this morning," he said. "We had breakfast. She tell you anything new?" He chuckled. "Only that I'm lucky she still answers my texts." "You are." "I know." I heard something shift in his voice then. Not emotion exactly, but humility. The kind that takes years to grow. "I'm not fixing everything overnight," he said, "but I'm trying." I didn't tell him I forgave him, but I wished him peace, and that was enough. That night, I walked through the garden. It was freezing, but still. A few lights twinkled in the hedges. Someone had strung them up last minute, battery-powered, uneven. Beautiful in their imperfection. I thought of Robert, of our last Christmas together, the way he sang off-key to carols and burned the ham, the way he kissed my temple when no one was looking. I whispered into the cold air. I made it through. I don't know who I was speaking to. Him, myself. Both. The next day, Bethany sent an email. Subject, no subject. You got what you wanted. Congratulations. I hope it keeps you warm at night. I stared at the screen, not with anger, not even sadness, just recognition. She hadn't changed, and maybe she never would. But I had. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the digital folder I'd made, labeled Truth, in case they forget. Inside, all of it. The recordings, the timeline, the scanned letters, the court transcript, and at the top, a document titled simply, What They Tried to Take. I didn't need to share it. Not now, maybe not ever. But it was there. For Ellie, for the record, for myself. New Year's came quickly after. We toasted with ginger ale and sugar cookies. Someone brought a karaoke machine, and Ethel sang a surprisingly moving version of Auld Lang Syne. We all clapped, even though half of us forgot the words. I sat by the window again that night. Robert's watch ticking beside me. Midnight came without fanfare. No gunshots. No yelling. Just the soft hush of time moving forward. The first day of January, I wrote one sentence in my journal. I am no longer explaining who I am to people who refuse to see me. And that was the last time I wrote about Bethany. She became what she'd always been, a lesson, not a ghost, not a wound, a name I no longer had to carry. Spring arrived slowly, the way it always does when you've been through a long winter. The kind of winter that sits on your chest more than your doorstep. At Sunridge, daffodils were the first to rise, yellow and bright. No permission asked. The garden buzzed again. Birds returned. Even the cranky man in Unit 3 started smiling at strangers. I started sleeping with the window open. Just a crack. Enough to feel the breeze on my face as I fell asleep. Some nights I still reached for Robert's watch before bed, like a tether to something that would always make sense. Marion had a birthday in April, 91. We baked a terrible cake together, dry as cardboard, but made with real eggs and laughter. She told me, "We're not old. We're just done putting up with things." I liked that. Ellie came on weekends, sometimes with homework, sometimes just for tea. She'd sit cross-legged on my bed, her shoes kicked off, telling me stories about lectures and roommates and the professor who smelled like wet pennies. "You know," she said one afternoon, "I don't think I'll ever marry." I looked up from my knitting. That a statement or a warning? She laughed. "I just mean, I watched what silence did to you, and I want more than survival. I want joy." I reached over and took her hand. "Then don't settle for less." We didn't speak for a moment. Then she said quietly, "You changed me." I squeezed her fingers. "You kept me going." A few weeks later, I received a letter from a woman I didn't know. She wrote, "My daughter sent me your story. She said, 'This sounds like Grandma.'" I cried reading it. Not because it was sad, but because it was brave. I didn't know women like us could still take our stories back. "Thank you for showing me we can." I held that letter for a long time, and then I started receiving more. From Kansas, from New Hampshire, from women who had been erased in their own homes, women who had been called burdens, witches, curses, women who once felt they had no name but mom, no right but silence. They thanked me, not for what I lost, but for how I stopped losing. And so I kept writing, not memoirs, not anything fancy, just pages about the garden, about Robert, about the pie that flopped but made everyone laugh, about the girl who fainted in class and still found the strength to stand up for me. I wrote the quiet things, the ordinary things that saved me. Now, every morning, I sit by the window with my tea. I watch the trees shift from green to gold to bare and back again. And I think about everything they took, everything they tried to take, and how none of it, not my name, not my story, not my damn breath, belonged to them. It still doesn't. So if you're reading this, and you've been quiet too long, or small too often, or kind to people who mistook that for weakness, hear me now. You are not invisible. You are not done. You don't have to wait for someone to say you matter. You do. Don't let them silence you. Tell your story.